Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
I guess. I mean, I got this far, but when I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman and he said,
"You're right, there ought to be a law."
And he sat down, he wrote me out, and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law.
I'm just a bill, guess I'm only a bill, and I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few congressmen discuss and debate. Well, if it be law, how I hope and pray that but today I turn to hero.
Listen to these congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
You know, it is, and I'm one of the lucky ones, because most bills never even get this far. And if they don't report favorably on me, I'm gonna die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee.
Bill, you're up!
Yeah, it looks like I'm gonna live, and I gotta go to the House of Representatives now, and then they're gonna vote on me, so.
So if they vote yes, what happens?
Well, then I go to the Senate, and then the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I wait in a line. The bills for the president to sign. Someday I'll be gone, how I hope and pray that from today I turn to bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yep, that's called a veto. And if the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again. But you know, by that time...
By that time, it's very unlikely that you'll become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
Nope.
But how I hope and pray that
He signed you, Bill. Now you're a law.
Good afternoon, NuPath. Today is July 29th. You are watching NuPath Live. This is the time that we have dedicated as an organization to communicate with our stakeholders, our families, our staff, the people we serve, and everybody else that's interested in what's going on with NuPath. Now, that song that you might have just heard as you were waiting or as you were queuing up your YouTube to watch this wonderful production was done. If you lived any time between, I think, like in the 70s, 1973 to 1984, it was part of the Schoolhouse Rock Project, and it was a series of educational videos that many of us learned about some of the key civics lessons of what happens in Congress and what makes a bill a law. And today we're going to make this format a little bit more educational, because there's something that I believe that everybody that's invested and connected one way or another with NuPath should know about. So we're going to talk about something called ARPA. Now this stands for the American Rescue Plan Act. You will hear it referred to as ARPA if you haven't already. And as we heard in the song, this started with the idea of President Biden, who wanted to create a rescue plan for people that were suffering from COVID for the United States in general. And so it starts in DC, and that little bill made its way up the halls of the Capitol building up the stairs of the Capitol building. And then there was advocacy from the likes of Anchor and ADDP and many other trades that were trying to get as much of this money as possible for the disabilities industry. Of course, there's many people yelling for stimulus for the people that were unemployed, and that $1,400 stimulus, I think it was his last time, went through. And then there was debates in Congress, and then finally there was the signing of this act. Okay, so now what? Now we have this act that is, I don't know how many, 1,400 pages long or some ridiculous amount of length of long, covering all components of our economy in various ways. And we got the, I'm waiting for a graphic to come up, but we got the word of it finally, that it was an onslaught. And what it started as had been this sort of, okay, it got passed. Now we're waiting to see what the translation is and how it affected us here in the trenches. We then got a flurry of calls, and ADP and the board is discussing what this means. People are crunching numbers to see if it's going to meet all of our demands. We're worried about the additional oversight and planning and thinking, how is this stimulus going to affect NuPath? Because at the end of the day, that's what I care about more than anything. How is it going to how can we maximize the benefit for the NuPath family? So suddenly, what started out as a national thing gets drilled down to the thing that's most important to me, and that is the NuPath family. So now what? People have probably heard about this act because what's been in the news is that there's going to be money that's been set aside to help strengthen the workforce. In fact, there are many agencies already that have given their employees much deserved bonuses. Others have chosen to increase their salaries in order to address the workforce crisis. And so the easy thing is to think, well, this money's there. Why isn't NuPath doing something with that money? And I thought it would be great to talk to the person that is the smartest person at NuPath. We all know that's Ted Horn, and bring him on to help explain some of the specifics to us today as we try to think about how this is going to impact the staff at NuPath. Ted Horn, welcome to NuPath Live.
Thank you, Dan. It's good.
Did you know, did I tell you before you're the smartest person at NuPath?
You did, and this subject could certainly counter that and make people question it, trying to unpack this.
Well, I thought about doing the job myself, but it's easier to let somebody else do it and then just criticize them harshly if they make a mistake. So that's the tact I've chosen to employ with you. But would you be willing to kind of walk us through, maybe start out by giving like an overview of it was something like $1.9 trillion, which is an amount that's just, I read someplace that if you stacked dollar bills, or actually I shouldn't even go there, but it would go from the world to the sun, like the string of bills would cover that much space, even though it takes like 14 years traveling the speed of sound to get there. Talk to us about what the ARPA is, this Rescue Act.
Okay, I'm going to put on my virtual shin pads as I stumble through the subject. But I'm going to try not to get too deep in the weeds on this. We don't want to turn 3 o'clock into a siesta hour with naps, but we'll get far enough so that we give an in-depth understanding here. So if we can call up the first slide. What we're looking at here, Dan, as you mentioned, it's the American Rescue Plan Act. And, you referenced the trillion $1.9 trillion. It's a huge federal package. And, if we break that down a little bit, of that 1.9 trillion, $362 billion has gone out to states. And that $362 billion is in the control of the local allocations and appropriations. And many people have probably seen in the news, and we saw some of the news clips, that with Massachusetts, it does need to be appropriated. So Baker is working with the State House in how to get all of the plans to spend the $5.3 billion that came to Massachusetts. NuPath is then in, when we look at the hierarchy of how this money goes down, I have a dollar amount, but a question mark that we're going to answer a little bit today. And then finally, what's probably of great interest to our workforce is how is that then going to affect and benefit the people that support our programs, our frontline workforce staff. And we will talk about that as well. The other graphic we see on this screen answers some of the questions of what ARPA proclaimed to do. And proclaimed is, just short of promises, right? I have emboldened, deliver direct relief to the American people. And we're going to, at the end of this introduction, we'll talk about that just a little bit. It's also directed at rescuing the economy and finally beating the virus. So the other graphic on the screen we see is how can it help? And we see the pie chart. It's cut up into so many little different pieces that you can get lost in trying to unpack this. You mentioned the $1,400 stimulus payments that many of us, if not all of us listening to this broadcast, have received. There's other benefits that have already been delivered, including the Child Care Tax Act that's going through, that's enhanced, that people are receiving if they have children. The unemployment benefits were expanded till September 6th with this act. And health insurance rates in terms of beating the virus, continuation of COVID for those who are unemployed, as well as lowering premiums on health insurance. So those are some of the details. There's many more, as you can see, but for us, we're going to look at the next slide, which talks about Massachusetts and that $5.3 billion. So when we go to the Massachusetts and see how it's really affecting us, there's $5.3 billion allocated to Massachusetts plus. And I use the word plus because that's really the money that's going to come directly to NuPath. What Medicaid is doing, and this is under, I talked about that the $362 billion went to the states and they could decide what would benefit their local situations. Well, the federal government is also benefiting the local groups, and they've retained some control of that money. As you saw, the 1.9 minus 362 billion, that's with CMS, which oversees the Medicaid dollars. What CMS is doing, and I'll do this very quickly.
And Ted, just for the person out there that maybe some of this stuff is new to, Medicaid and CMS, it is where we get basically all of our funding comes
Yes.
through the federal government, through the states.
Yes.
Some portion of it, the state puts in to help fund our programs, and a big part of it is in form of matching that the federal government makes available. But it is a huge windfall for Massachusetts to have this 10% additional matching that is dedicated specifically for programs for people with developmental and cognitive disabilities.
100%. Typically Massachusetts gets reimbursed 50 cents on the dollar through Medicaid. During this time, Massachusetts will be getting reimbursed 60 cents on the dollar. And that 10%, while 10% doesn't sound like a lot, when you put it into dollars, it's huge. It's huge numbers. It's going to be coming back to Massachusetts. So what the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, which oversees the Massachusetts, our programs, they are the body that oversees, in addition to many others, our rehabilitation, as well as our developmental DDS programs. They've allocated $500 million to 3 phases. And the 3 phases of spending that money, the first, they've recognized the value of our frontline workforce. And what they have gotten approved in the round 1 spending is $100 million to strengthen the workforce. There's some provisions of how that can be used, and we won't go through all of those provisions, but simply put, that money is going into the hands and pockets of the frontline workforce. That is what it's been directed to do, and that is how NuPath is going to be using the funding, the portion. We're not going to realize $100 million. We are one of many who are tapping into that money, but we will realize a good amount of money.
And Ted, I know you're going to explain like how, you know, it's going to be based on our billing and utilization and all of that, but I think it's important maybe to point out here that this is a one-time sum of money, and we're going to touch on that in a minute, but I think that, you know, because the obvious thing would be, oh good, let's just give everybody a raise, but that money will be here this year, but next year we will not have a repeat of that same thing. So if we did that, gave everybody a big raise, but then next year we would be able to pay the same amount because we won't be getting that additional money into our accounts.
You know, and if we were to talk about truths and myths, right? What we may hear, the first myth that we'll dispel is what we may hear is, oh, this lasts until March 2024, because that's what is written into the ARPA, that this is ongoing funding for initiatives to carry through the recovery. For us, this round 1, it lasts from July 1st through December 31st. It's a 6-month period where we will be receiving an extra 10% on our utilization rates. And our utilization rates are what we're reimbursed for the services that we provide. So this is a short term. The other piece of it, and talking, Dan, with you, is while we have another, you know, there's a couple of truths. The first truth is that it's time limited. The second truth is that this round 1 needs to be spent by June 30th of 2022. In talking to you earlier today, we're going to have no problem. You know, your desire is to get this as soon as we have it, get it out. You know, when can we start getting it out? And there's a process for that. But you know, for anyone listening, rest assured, you know, we're going to be able to report on how we've spent this money and benefited, you know, our frontline workforce well before that deadline. So those are some of the nuances and procedural pieces that we, you know, when we hear that the ARPA stretches through 2024, yes, that is a truth, but the myth is that it's not ongoing funding for us during that time period.
Mm-hmm. And I think you said it, or maybe you touched on it, but I think it's worth repeating. This is money specifically for people that are engaging directly on a regular basis with our clients.
Yes. Not
for administrative staff, not for CEOs, not even for vice presidents of quality and training. As much as you've begged me, it's something that as it should, because our staff have been the heroes through this pandemic, and while I think many organizations are talking about using it, and I think we'll get to this too in a minute, but I'm talking about using it as recruitment or sign-on bonuses. We're very interested in figuring out how to use it for the staff that are, you know, that currently here with us now. So I'll try to zip it, let you continue on.
We'll get into that in just one second. Just for anyone who's interested, I mentioned there's 3 rounds. You know, the second round is there's $44 million allocated for rebalancing the long-term care system, which is really to strengthen the human service system as a whole, of promoting more, you know, keeping people in the community and diverting them from long-term care facilities out of the community. And then finally, round 3, which we don't have a crystal ball, but there's the big pot of money is $350 million. That will be invested in the human services to strengthen the human service system. We just don't know how at this point.
But I heard recently the commissioner on Tuesday at the ADP meeting was, well, maybe it wasn't there, it was something else, but talking about it being, thinking about the infrastructure and technology being, likely to be a emphasis in that third phase. Is that, have you heard that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was on that call, and she not only referenced it, but the Division of Medical Assistance also has weekly stakeholder calls, and they've referenced the same thing. I think the important piece to recognize here is not only the advocacy, and Dan, I know you're a part of through the trade organizations, you're part of some of the collaborative advocacy that goes on, that the Executive Office of Health and Human Services listened to the provider community and valued the frontline workforce in allocating upfront before anything else was done, valuing and demonstrating the value and appreciation for that frontline workforce that's gotten us, going to knock on wood here, through to this point. So,
and we've been dedicating these NuPath Lives, all summer long to really talking to some of those frontline workers and celebrating together the amazing sacrifices they made during the pandemic and some of the exciting, innovative stuff they're continuing to do, post-pandemic. So, I think there's no doubt that they deserve whatever we can get to them from this.
So let's talk about that. We can go
Yeah.
to the next slide and start to talk about that. So, how it affects NuPath. We've covered the federal, we've covered the state, and now we're going to get to the micro level of how it affects NuPath and NuPath's ARPA. How much? The math is, where we'd love to do projections. In this case, it's important to recognize the math and to do this correctly. Dan, you mentioned when all those dollars are added up, how they stretch out. What we see here is that thus far, even though the time period started on July 1st, we have not seen a dollar yet on the enhanced funding. We will be getting a 10% enhanced rate on our billing. We know we will be getting that. However, to understand the billing system, first you need to provide the service. Then the service, data needs to go to our business office to put it into the formatting in order to get our billing ready to go. And then it goes into the state system, who processes it. Finally, this kind of is, along the same path of how a bill becomes a law. Then finally, whatever number of weeks later, we get paid for the services that we provide, and it takes time. It's a time-intensive process, complicated right now by the fact that you mentioned a flurry of activity. This all happened very fast, and to understand the billing system, and I don't understand it enough other to acknowledge, there are thousands of billing codes that need to be updated. So what we're told is that in our current billing, if we don't see the 10%, rest assured it's coming. That we have all the confidence in the world. We know it's coming. However, the dollars need to accumulate so that we can do something with it. We need the dollars we need something substantial to give something substantial.
So to the managers, directors out there in the day programs and in our residential homes that are doing their attendance, this is you are the first step toward realizing any of this money, right? So if we have people that are not living in one of our houses because they're still living at home with their family, that is going to subtract from what we can bill. So we won't be getting 10%. on the full amount that we could be getting because we're not at full occupancy. If people aren't able to get into our programs over these next 6 months, and or at least the level that we want them to be, and so we're billing at lower levels, we're only going to get 10% additionally on the services that we provide. So it's in a way, it's, we're still in a position where we're not fully, we're not back to full occupancy. And it looks like, depending on, what happens with this Delta strain and variant, hopefully we don't go back a phase, but we're really looking at trying to maximize our attendance and billing here, because this is how it's going to be assigned the amount of money that we get, right? I mean, simply put.
Absolutely.
So those
Absolutely.
staff
And
that you're doing the data, it's so important that you get it right, because it makes a big difference.
absolutely. And, for the managers and the life coaches and the direct support professionals, you've mentioned it before. It was easier to close than it is to reopen. And we see that every day. We recognize the work that you're doing to bring people back in. We're bringing people back safely. We're bringing people back to the services that they need. And, thus far, we've been able to extend gratitude and, our appreciation for and the collaborative effort that everybody has done to get these programs back up and open. This next step is, you've earned what's coming, you've earned more than what's coming, but, we will be getting a 10% enhanced rate on every service that we provide. And that 10% will be going to the frontline workforce.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to go back to your slides?
No, I think, in terms of a wrap up with that, I talked about that the very first bullet I bolded was the what ARPA promised and direct relief for American people. And this is one way that those who are doing the hardest work are going to see some of that direct relief. And we're just happy that we can be a conduit to process that and process it to you. And Dan, I know you have an announcement.
Well, Ted, in the last 5 minutes that we have, I want you to kind of part of what we do here is try to imagine what we could do and what messaging works with our employees. We learned a long time ago that everybody doesn't read my emails, although I can't believe they wouldn't. It kind of hurts my feelings. No, I'm kidding. I don't even like to read my emails. So this is part of the reason why we do NuPath Live. I wonder how many people are watching this or will be seeing this or noticing in the background this refer a friend. The referral incentive program that we had launched, back at the beginning of the summer, where you could get $300. Things are tough, guys. We need your help. So at $300, most people didn't know somebody. Well, we didn't get a huge response from that. But at $1,000, do you think people might know somebody? We're going to try this for a while. If it worked, it could be a major answer to our problems. We can't provide the quality service that we need to be doing or that we're committed to without the quality staff in place. We know that without the full complement of staff, it's putting a strain on the existing staff that we want so much to take care of and support and protect. And we can't expand and add more people to our programs in order to maximize the amount of money that we could be getting from ARPA if we don't have staff in place. So there's all of these reasons why this is a family crisis. This is a family affair. I need everybody to be thinking again. That goes for board members, anybody that could be watching this. If you refer somebody to a position at NuPath and they're hired, you will get $1,000. And the friend you refer, or the person, doesn't have to be a friend, I suppose. I mean, in theory, you'd want to make sure it was somebody good for NuPath. They'll get $500, and on their first paycheck paid. And we're going to see what this does. It would cost us $30,000 for 20 referrals, and if we were able to get 20 staff for $30,000, it would be well worth it. Many organizations are just doing a straight, sign-on bonus, but we feel that that this may be a better way because number one, it's giving the staff that are part of this agency a chance to, cash in on for themselves. And I guess the theory is we think that if you're referring somebody to NuPath and they're hired, that the chances of them being successful and NuPath grade or NuPath quality is increased than if it's just some cold, cold application or person signing on. What are you're part of the experience group. What do you think? Do you think this is going to work, Ted, or
I have more than hope. Yeah, I mean, these are tough times, and we need everyone. We need to try everything and anything, but this is the one strategy that we know from past practice has worked. It has helped us grow to the point that we are today. And Dan and I, we were talking earlier. The agencies that are giving a straight sign-on bonus, recruiting somebody that way, sure, it grabs their attention. But if they're just joining for the bonus, that's not where our staff have come to us from, right? They've come from word of mouth, learning about NuPath. I've missed having live orientations, hearing how people came to us. While we don't have the data in front of us of longevity from staff who have been referred from a friend that worked at NuPath, we know from observation. We just know from throwing out names. Oh yeah, they were referred by. And the reason we have to think about who they referred by, because they've stayed 5, 7, 10 years. We know it works.
Well, Ted, I wish I could keep you another 5 to 7 years, but unfortunately we're out of time. So I'm going to say goodbye to you. Thank you so much for coming on and trying to unpack a very complicated situation a little bit, hopefully giving a little bit more understanding for people. Thank you for that. And we'll talk to you again soon, okay? And as I close this, think not just about people that you know that are out of work looking for work. Think about people that are currently working someplace that they hate their job. Everybody's got one of those friends. All they do is complain every time you go, I hate my job, I hate my supervisor. Next time they do, you tell them to come apply to NuPath, and we'll give them something they can be happy with. All right, everybody, you're awesome. We will be in touch. We're going to get this money to you just as soon as we know how we can do it. And because we got this. All right, everybody, see you next week. Bye-bye.